The world could never have prepared for this moment. At the stroke of midnight, a video emerged, unpolished, trembling, raw, and in only a handful of words, millions of hearts around the globe shattered in unison. On the screen, a woman appeared, her cheeks wet with uncontrollable tears, her hands visibly quivering as she steadied the camera. With a voice fractured by grief, she whispered words that stopped time itself. "I am Malcolm Jamal Warner's only wife, and I am not here to fight for wealth. I am here to fight for my husband's name." In that instant, everything people thought they knew came crashing down. The internet froze. Screens went dark with shock. For weeks, the world had been convinced of a different narrative, the one painted in bold colors by none other than Tracee Ellis Ross. The tabloids, the talk shows, the endless viral posts, everybody believed her. They believed the DNA reports she waved around like holy scripture. They believed the hidden wedding tale. They believed the stage photographs. People had embraced the image of Tracee as the grieving secret widow, the woman carrying a hidden truth about Malcolm that no one could have foreseen. For weeks, sympathy was hers. Headlines rallied in her favor, and the public devoured the story like a tragic love song. But then came this woman. Not an actress, not a celebrity, not someone polished and prepared for cameras. No red carpets behind her, no Instagram lifestyle to validate her. Just a woman who had lived in silence, deliberately hidden, carrying the weight of truth that no one had ever asked her to reveal. She didn't come armed with paparazzi photos. She came with evidence, receipts that burned through the lies. One by one, she laid them down before the camera. The official marriage license with Malcolm's unmistakable signature, the hospital records bearing his name, the death certificate carved in cold finality, and finally, the $200 million insurance payout already signed into her name. But what crushed the world was not the documents. It was her trembling voice when she broke down and said, "If Tracee's marriage is real, then my husband lived a double life. And my soul knows he could never do that." Fans collapsed emotionally. It was no longer a simple scandal. It was heartbreak bleeding out in real time. A woman drowning in grief. A legacy shredded by accusations. And, most painfully of all, a teenage girl caught at the center of this storm. An alleged daughter, Malcolm's supposed child, pulled into a brutal spotlight she never chose. Imagine being her. Every day, waking up not to laughter, but to interrogation. Every headline questioning, is she truly his child, or is she just another pawn in a game for money and fame? One day, she is hailed as Malcolm's heir. The next, she is mocked as a fraud. She scrolls online only to see her name twisted into memes, her face plastered on gossip blogs, her existence debated by strangers like courtroom evidence. This was no longer about inheritance. It was no longer about status. This was about truth. This was about protecting the name of a man who gave his life to his craft, to dignity, to love, and whose reputation was now being dismantled by the very world that once adored him. And so, as dawn broke after that midnight video, silence hung heavier than ever before. The silence of disbelief. The silence of betrayal. The silence of a public realizing they may have been cheering for the wrong person. Tracee Ellis Ross, for weeks, had commanded the spotlight as the tragic widow, the woman wronged, the woman who had carried a hidden love. Her story had been eaten up by the media machine. But now all of it, every ounce of credibility, was unraveling before millions of eyes. Because this woman, the real wife, wasn't rehearsed. She wasn't acting. She wasn't trying to sell a performance. She was broken, and brokenness cannot be faked. The receipts spoke. The documents roared. The tears drowned out every carefully crafted narrative. The letters came next, handwritten by Malcolm himself. Words from the grave, ink pressed on a paper by his own hand. Words of devotion, faith, and trust. Letters that spoke not of two wives, but of one. Letters where he named the woman from the midnight video as his love, his only, his soul's partner. His instructions were clear. If anything ever happened to him, she would carry his legacy forward. The world was not ready for that revelation, because suddenly this wasn't just a wife speaking, it was Malcolm himself, echoing across time, reminding the world of the truth. Imagine being Tracee in that moment. For weeks, she had stood tall, bathed in sympathy, her Hollywood poise earning her applause. Now the mask crumbled. Her romance turned into something darker, a lie, a script, a ploy. The fans who had cheered her began to question her every word. Was she ever truly in love? Or had she simply been playing the grieving widow in the greatest performance of her career? But the deepest wound was not in the courtroom battles or the fan reactions. It was in the eyes of the girl, the alleged daughter, a child whose life was collapsing piece by piece. Reports began to leak. She stopped attending school. She cried in bathrooms when teachers mentioned Malcolm's name. Classmates whispered cruel things behind her back. Is she really his, or just another fake? One witness said she muttered once, "I wish I didn't exist. Maybe then they'd leave me alone." Those words struck like knives, because whether or not she carried Malcolm's DNA, she was still a child. Innocent, vulnerable, shattered by adult wars she never asked to fight. Tracee, once heralded as the grieving queen, was now cornered. Paparazzi captured her sobbing, covering her face, lashing out at cameras. Her team scrambled, insisting the video was fake, the documents forged, the narrative twisted. But the world had already turned its back. And then came the courtroom. The air was suffocating. Cameras flashed, pens scribbled, the gallery packed with fans desperate to watch history unfold. On one side sat Malcolm's true wife, pale and trembling, clutching the letters that carried her husband's voice. On the other sat Tracee, surrounded by an army of lawyers, her pride forcing her to lift her chin even as exhaustion consumed her. The judge's command sliced through the air. Bring forth the evidence. The marriage license was presented first. Gasps filled the room. The signature was undeniable. Tracee's lawyers howled forgery, but the judge inspected it carefully, his silence deafening. Then the letters. Each one read aloud, Malcolm's words echoing like a ghost in the courtroom. If anything happens to me, my wife is to handle everything. She's my heart. She carries my soul. The clerk herself broke down while reading. The gallery wept. Even reporters lowered their cameras to wipe tears. Tracee's composure melted. She whispered frantically to her team, her face collapsing. But the final blow was the video. Malcolm, filmed in his final months, sitting tired but smiling softly at his kitchen table. His words pierced the silence. If anything happens to me, remember, I had one wife. She knows who she is, and I pray she never has to fight for what is already hers. The courtroom froze. No one moved. People sobbed openly. The truth could no longer be denied. Tracee Ellis Ross, once elegant, once admired, erupted. She leapt to her feet, sobbing hysterically. He loved me too. You don't understand. He loved me. The courtroom spiraled into chaos. Cameras clicked, pens raced. The judge hammered for order. But the world had already witnessed the collapse. The hashtags were instant. Hashtag Tracee breaks. Hashtag courtroom collapse. Hashtag justice for Malcolm. Outside, crowds swelled with fury. Protesters held signs. Protect Malcolm's legacy. Others demanded Tracee's arrest. News anchors cried live on air. Social media flooded with edits overlaying Malcolm's voice against images of his grieving wife. But through all the noise, one shadow lingered, the girl, the supposed daughter, her identity torn apart. Reports surfaced that she hadn't left her room for days, whispering to old photos. Was he really my dad? Or just a story? The final battlefield became the DNA test. The courtroom fell into chilling silence as the results were opened. Pages rustled like thunder. Time froze. The probability of paternity between Malcolm Jamal Warner and the minor child is 0. Gasps erupted. Reporters stumbled. The little girl's world collapsed. The man she had believed was her father, her hero, was not hers at all. Imagine that devastation. To lose not only a father, but an identity. To watch strangers online mock your very existence. To become the punchline of memes when all you ever wanted was love. Hollywood turned its back on Tracee. Endorsements gone. Projects scrapped. Friends vanished. Tabloids branded her a liar. Headlines screamed, "Collapse of a Queen." And Malcolm's real wife, broken, sobbing, clutching the letters, whispered to cameras, "I only wanted his truth. I only wanted his name to stay pure." The world cried with her. Fans gathered at vigils, painting murals of Malcolm's face surrounded by words like truth, legacy, love. Yet behind the candles and flowers, the grief remained heavier than ever. Because in the end, this wasn't entertainment. This wasn't gossip. This was tragedy, raw, brutal, unforgettable. A wife stripped of peace, a child robbed of innocence, a woman destroyed by her own lies, and a man's memory dragged into a war he never chose. Malcolm Jamal Warner gave the world joy, art, laughter, hope. And now, instead of being remembered for that brilliance, his name is tied to scandal, courtroom battles, and betrayal. The saddest truth of all? He never had the chance to defend himself. And now the question remains, what do we do with this truth? Do we let it vanish in our gossip hashtags? Or do we, together, protect his memory? Because love deserves better. Truth deserves better. Malcolm deserves better. And if we let his story be drowned in lies, then we are just as guilty of erasing his legacy. So remember this. Beyond the noise, beyond the collapse, there was Malcolm, a husband, a man who wanted nothing but love, peace, and dignity. And that is the story worth fighting for.